Jake's coming over again tonight? The words left my mouth before I even realized I had thought them. Emily's hands, busy chopping carrots for the evening's dinner, paused for a fraction of a second. The faintest flicker of something, a shadow of irritation, perhaps, crossed her face before she smiled at me. It was the same soft, easy smile she always wore when she wanted to smooth over tension. Yeah, she said, her tone casual, almost too casual. He's helping me rearrange the garage. You've been so swamped with work lately, and I didn't want to bother you with it. Jake offered, so I said yes. You don't mind, do you? I leaned against the counter, watching her closely. I could have done it this weekend. You know that. Her knife resumed its steady rhythm, chopping the carrots into perfect, uniform pieces. I know, she said lightly, but it's already been sitting there for weeks. I figured it'd be nice to get it done before the holidays. It's not a big deal, John. There it was again, that same dismissive tone she'd used before. I felt the words rising in my throat, words I probably shouldn't say. Instead, I took a breath and tried to keep my tone easy. Jake's been spending a lot of time here lately. Seems like he's around more than he is at his own place. Emily stopped chopping again, just for a moment. This time, she set the knife down and turned to look at me. Her eyes sparkled with amusement, but her smile didn't quite reach them. Oh, stop. He's your best friend, John. Don't tell me you're jealous of Jake. Jealous? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. No, I hesitated, searching for the right words. I just think it's unusual, that's all. She rolled her eyes and picked up the knife again. Jake's been part of our lives for years. He's practically family. You're reading way too much into this. She turned back to the cutting board, but not before I caught her biting her lip. It was a small thing, but I knew it well, a nervous habit she'd had since college. My chest tightened, and a knot of unease settled low in my stomach. Jake arrived just after dinner, the sound of his truck pulling into the driveway familiar enough that Emily didn't even glance out the window. She was finishing up loading the dishwasher when he walked in, carrying a six-pack of beer and grinning like he owned the place. "Johnny boy," he called out, his voice booming as he clapped me on the back. "How's the hardest working man I know?" I forced a smile, stepping back slightly to put some space between us. "Busy," I replied, "but someone's got to keep the lights on around here." Emily laughed from the kitchen, her voice light and airy. "Don't let him fool you, Jake. John's a workaholic. He doesn't know how to sit still." Jake chuckled, popping the cap off a beer and taking a long swig. "Well, that's why you've got me, right? To keep Emily company while you're out conquering the corporate world." There was nothing overtly wrong with what he said, just a friendly joke between old friends. But the way he said, "keep Emily company," sent an uneasy ripple through me. I forced another smile. "Yeah, thanks for that." Emily came over, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Jake, you want to grab those boxes from the garage? I'll be out in a minute." He nodded, draining the rest of his beer before setting the bottle down on the counter. "Sure thing. Anything for you, Em?" The casual way he said her name, Em, not Emily, set my teeth on edge. I watched as he headed toward the garage, his movements loose and confident, like he belonged here. Emily tossed the dish towel over her shoulder and started to follow him, but I stepped in her path. "I could help you," I said, trying to keep my tone even. She blinked up at me, her smile faltering just slightly. "It's fine, John. You've been working all day. Relax. Jake and I can handle it." I hesitated, searching her face for any sign of something. But she was already moving past me, her smile firmly back in place. "Don't wait up," she called over her shoulder as she disappeared into the garage. I tried to focus on the basketball game playing on TV, but my attention kept drifting to the garage. I could hear their muffled voices through the walls, laughing, talking, the occasional thud of a box being moved. It wasn't unusual for Jake to joke around, but tonight, something about the sound of their laughter grated on my nerves. I turned the volume up, trying to drown out the noise, but it didn't help. After a few minutes, I got up and walked to the kitchen, pretending to get a glass of water. The door to the garage was slightly ajar, and I could see their shadows moving against the far wall. "Jake, you're ridiculous." Emily's voice was playful, her laughter ringing out. "Hey, you're the one who said you wanted this moved. Jake replied, his tone just as teasing. I clenched my jaw, gripping the glass in my hand. It wasn't that they were doing anything inappropriate, at least not that I could see, but there was an ease between them, a familiarity that I couldn't shake. After a few moments, I went back to the living room, telling myself I was overreacting. When they finally came back inside, Jake was carrying the last of the boxes, his face flushed from the effort. Emily followed behind him, her hair slightly disheveled, but she was smiling. All done, she announced, brushing her hands together. Great, I said, forcing a smile. Guess I won't have to worry about it this weekend after all. Jake clapped me on the shoulder again, his grin as wide as ever. Nope, you're off the hook. We make a good team, don't we, Em? Emily laughed, but I noticed she didn't look at me when she replied. Yeah, we do. Jake stayed for another beer, the three of us sitting in the living room and chatting about nothing in particular. At least they were chatting. I mostly listened, watching the way they interacted. When Jake finally left, Emily stretched and stood up, yawning. I'm heading to bed, she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Don't stay up too late. I nodded, watching her as she walked down the hall. Later that night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had been growing all evening. I wanted to trust her. I did trust her. But something about the way she and Jake acted around each other didn't sit right with me. I thought back to the little things I'd noticed over the past few weeks. The way Jake's truck always seemed to be parked outside when I came home early. The way Emily's phone seemed to light up more often than usual, always with a quick swipe to dismiss the notification. The way she'd started wearing makeup more often, even when she wasn't going out. It could all be nothing. Maybe I really was overthinking things. But the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. Beside me, Emily stirred in her sleep, her breathing soft and steady. I glanced over at her, studying her face in the dim light. She looked peaceful, innocent, but I couldn't shake the thought that something wasn't right. And I wasn't sure I wanted to know the truth. The nagging feeling refused to let go, growing like a shadow in the back of my mind. At first, I tried to dismiss it, chalking it up to overwork or paranoia. After all, Emily and Jake had been a part of my life for years. Emily is my wife, and Jake is my best friend. It felt absurd to question their loyalty. But as the days passed, the signs became harder to ignore. Jake's truck parked near our house when I came home early. Emily smiling at her phone, quickly putting it away when I entered the room. Conversations between them that seemed overly friendly, their laughter a bit too easy. The tipping point came one Thursday evening. I'd been caught up at work all week and decided to leave early to surprise Emily with dinner. As I turned the corner to our street, I noticed Jake's car parked 2 houses down. My first thought was that it could be a coincidence, but the doubt I'd been trying to suppress surged back with a vengeance. When I walked into the house, Emily was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. She looked up startled. You're home early, she said, a strained smile on her face. Thought I'd surprise you, I replied, dropping my bag by the door. Where's Jake? His car's down the street. Her knife paused mid-slice. Oh, he just stopped by to drop something off. He's gone now. Her explanation felt too quick, too rehearsed. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept it, but something inside me snapped. That night, Emily went to bed early, claiming a headache. I stayed downstairs, staring blankly at the TV. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that made my thoughts louder. I grabbed my phone, scrolling through old photos. Our wedding day, Luna as a baby, Liam's first soccer game. They were supposed to remind me of the love we shared, but instead, they only deepened the ache in my chest. I set my phone down and leaned back, closing my eyes. But instead of fading, the nagging feeling grew stronger. I couldn't shake the thought that something wasn't right. Before I could talk myself out of it, I went to the study. I knew Emily kept her email and social media accounts logged in on the family computer. It felt wrong, an invasion of her privacy, but the doubt had taken over. My hands trembled as I moved the mouse and opened her email. At first, I found nothing unusual. Work emails, messages from friends, school updates for the kids. I began to feel guilty, ready to close the tab, when a particular thread caught my eye. It was labeled plans and had Jake's name attached. I clicked it. The first message was from Jake. Can't wait until Christmas. Finally, we'll have the life we always talked about. Emily's reply was immediate, as if she had been waiting for him to write. Just a little longer, babe. Once John pays off the house, we'll tell him. He's so clueless. It'll be easy to take everything in the divorce. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My chest tightened, and my hands gripped the edge of the desk. But I couldn't stop reading. The emails laid everything bare. Plans to sell the house. Custody arrangements for Luna and Liam. Details of nights they'd spent together while I was away on business trips. Jake reassuring her that everything would work out, that I'd never see it coming. Then I found the file attachment in one of the emails, labeled Test Results. I hesitated, a sinking feeling washing over me as I clicked it. The file opened to a paternity test. Luna and Liam weren't mine. My stomach churned as I stared at the results. The room felt like it was spinning, the walls closing in. All those memories I'd cherished. Luna calling me daddy for the first time, Liam holding my hand as he learned to walk, suddenly felt like cruel jokes. I closed the computer and leaned back in the chair, my head in my hands. Every fiber of me wanted to storm into the bedroom, wake Emily up and demand answers. But I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat there in the dark, piecing together the lies. Then I overheard my wife smugly tell our kids in their room, "Your real father is Dad's best friend, Jake. Honestly, your dad is too clueless to ever figure it out. Once the house is paid off, thanks to his hard work, we'll break the news at Christmas. I'll take everything in the divorce. The house, the money, and full custody of you two. Then we'll move in with your real father, and life will finally be perfect for us." My stomach churned again. The next morning, Emily acted as if nothing was wrong. She hummed softly as she poured herself a cup of coffee, greeting me with a kiss on the cheek. "Morning. Did you sleep okay?" I forced a smile, nodding. "Yeah, you." "Better," she said, her tone light. "Headache's gone?" I watched her closely, searching her face for any sign of guilt or hesitation. But she was good at this, too good. As the days passed, I started to notice even more. Her phone would buzz late at night, and she'd silence it quickly. Jake stopped coming around as often, but when he did, their interactions were carefully measured, as if they were trying not to be too obvious. I began keeping a journal, documenting every suspicious interaction, every lie. If I was going to confront her, I needed proof. One evening, I told Emily I had a late meeting at work, but instead I parked my car a few blocks away and walked back to the house. From the shadows, I watched as Jake's car pulled into the driveway. He got out carrying a bottle of wine. They didn't even wait to close the curtains. I stood there, frozen, watching as they laughed together in the living room. Jake leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from Emily's face before kissing her. She didn't pull away. I turned and walked back to my car, my mind racing. The next day, I met with a lawyer. I explained everything, Emily's emails, the paternity test, the affair. The lawyer listened carefully, nodding as he jotted down notes. "You've got a strong case," he said. "But if you want to ensure custody of the kids, we need to act strategically. You need to gather more evidence." "Custody?" I asked, my voice cracking. "The kids aren't even mine?" The lawyer gave me a sympathetic look. "That doesn't matter. You've been their father in every way that counts. The court will consider their best interests. And from what you've told me, Emily doesn't sound like she's putting them first." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. That night, I made my decision. I wasn't going to confront Emily, not yet. Instead, I'd wait for the right moment, building my case until there was no way she could twist the narrative in her favor. I started small. I installed cameras in the house, hidden in the living room, the kitchen, even the garage. I backed up all of Emily's emails and texts, saving them onto an encrypted drive. I even hired a private investigator to follow her and Jake. Each new piece of evidence felt like a dagger to the heart, but it also strengthened my resolve. Weeks later, as Christmas approached, Emily's behavior grew more erratic. She was on edge, snapping at the kids over minor things and avoiding me altogether. Jake, meanwhile, had stopped coming around entirely. One evening, As I tucked Luna and Liam in a bed, Luna looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, is Uncle Jake coming for Christmas?" I froze, my chest tightening. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" "Mommy said we were going to have a special surprise this Christmas," she said. Liam chimed in, his voice sleepy. "Yeah, she said it was going to be a new start." I kissed their foreheads, forcing a smile. "Don't worry about that, okay? Just get some sleep." As I left their room, my hands clenched into fists. The betrayal wasn't just between Emily and me anymore. It was spilling over into my children's lives. By the time Christmas Eve arrived, I had everything I needed. That night, as Emily laughed with the kids, I felt a strange sense of calm. The storm was coming, but for now, I let her enjoy her final moments of pretending everything was fine. Because by morning, her perfect little plan was going to fall apart. The weight of what I had to do pressed on me like a storm cloud. It wasn't just anger fueling me, it was the sheer betrayal. The love I'd once felt for Emily had rotted, replaced by a cold resolve to ensure she couldn't destroy what was left of my life. I wasn't just walking away. I was taking the power back. The days leading up to Christmas Eve were a blur. Every action felt mechanical, as if I was on autopilot. But deep down, every step of the plan made me feel just a little more in control. Emily was cheerful on Christmas Eve morning, bustling around the house with a renewed sense of energy. I stood in the corner of the kitchen, sipping my coffee, watching her. She was humming to herself as she prepared breakfast for the kids. "John, can you help me wrap a few last-minute gifts later?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "Sure," I said flatly, trying not to let my voice betray the anger boiling beneath the surface. Her eyebrows furrowed for a moment. "You've been quiet the last few days. Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, forcing a small smile. "Just work stuff." She bought the excuse easily, nodding and turning back to the stove. It was almost laughable how little she suspected. That afternoon, Emily took the kids to her sister's house for a holiday playdate. She'd invited me to come along, but I declined, claiming I needed to finish some work before the long weekend. "Don't work too hard," she teased, kissing me on the cheek. The moment the door closed behind her, I sprang into action. The first thing I did was log into our joint bank accounts. My hands were steady as I transferred every cent into a new account I'd set up under the kids' trust. The lawyer had been clear. This was perfectly legal, as long as it was done before the divorce papers were served. I'd put the house into a separate trust to ensure Emily couldn't sell it out from under them. And I had the divorce papers ready, complete with all the evidence of her infidelity. When the last transfer was complete, I stared at the balance. Zero. It felt satisfying in a way I couldn't put into words. Emily had counted on that money to fund her fantasy life with Jake. Now, it was out of her reach. Next, I finalized the legal paperwork. The paternity test results were attached to the divorce documents, along with evidence of Emily's infidelity. My lawyer had also drawn up a trust agreement for the house, ensuring that it would belong solely to Luna and Liam until they turned 18. Emily wouldn't be able to sell it or borrow against it. I stacked the papers neatly in a folder, sealing them with a note. "Merry Christmas. The house is now in a trust for the kids. You'll never get a dime from me. Goodbye." As the afternoon wore on, I packed a single suitcase with my clothes and a few personal items. It felt surreal, walking through the house I'd worked so hard to build and knowing I'd never return. I paused in the living room, staring at the photos on the mantle, family vacations, birthdays, Christmases past. My eyes lingered on a picture of Luna and Liam, taken at the park last summer. They were laughing, their faces glowing with pure joy. Despite everything, they were still my kids. They might not share my DNA, but I'd raised them, loved them. That wasn't something I could walk away from, even if their mother had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I took the photo from the frame and slipped it into my suitcase. As evening fell, I set the scene for my departure. The Christmas tree stood in the corner of the living room, twinkling with lights. I placed a folder beneath it, right in front, where Emily would see it first thing in the morning. I took one last walk through the house, checking that everything was in place. In the kids' rooms, I left notes on their pillows. "Luna, always be kind and brave. Daddy loves you. Liam, never stop dreaming big. Daddy's proud of you." I sat on the edge of Luna's bed, staring at the note. Tears blurred my vision, but I blinked them away. I couldn't fall apart now. When I stepped into the garage, I glanced at the tools I'd spent years collecting, the shelves I'd built with my own hands. Jake had helped me with some of those projects. The thought made my stomach churn. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. For a moment, I hesitated, rolling it between my fingers. Then I set it on the workbench and walked away. By the time Emily and the kids returned, the house was dark. I parked my car a few streets away and watched from a distance as they went inside, their laughter echoing faintly in the crisp night air. I could imagine the scene. Emily putting the kids to bed, not noticing the envelope under the tree until later. Maybe she'd pour herself a glass of wine, sit down in the glow of the lights, and open it, expecting something sentimental. The thought brought a grim satisfaction. At 11 o'clock p.m., my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. "Where are you? Did you go out?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing my reply. "You'll understand soon enough." I turned the phone off after that. I drove through the night, the highway stretching endlessly before me. I didn't have a destination in mind, just a need to get away, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the life I was leaving behind. The betrayal had gutted me, but as the miles passed, I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time in months, maybe years, I wasn't weighed down by doubt or suspicion. The truth was out, and I was free. When I checked into a small motel just before dawn, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the peeling wallpaper. Exhaustion crept in, but sleep wouldn't come. My mind kept replaying the moments that had led to this, the emails, the lies, the nights I'd spent wondering where I'd gone wrong. I thought about Luna and Liam, about the life I'd imagined for us. It wasn't their fault, any of it. They deserved better than to be caught in the crossfire of their mother's deceit. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled through photos of them one last time before turning off the screen. Back at the house, I imagined Emily waking up, finding the envelope. I pictured her reading the note, flipping through the papers, realizing what I'd done. Would she cry? Scream? Call Jake? Whatever her reaction, it didn't matter anymore. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. 5 years passed like the turning of pages in a book I never thought I'd write. Each day brought new challenges, but also new beginnings. I moved to a different city, started my own business, and found someone who restored my faith and love, Claire. She was everything Emily wasn't. Kind, honest, and patient. She never pried about my past, though I eventually told her the whole story. Instead of pity, she offered me understanding. But while I was healing and rebuilding, Emily's life unraveled in ways I never anticipated. I first heard about her downfall through an old mutual friend, Brian, who called me out of the blue. "Hey, John," Brian said hesitantly when I picked up the phone. "Sorry to bother you. Just thought you should know. I ran into Emily the other day. I didn't respond right away, unsure if I wanted to hear more. She's not doing too well," Brian continued. "Jake's gone. Took off with some younger woman a year after you left. Drained her accounts before he did, too." I leaned back in my chair, letting the words settle. "And the kids?" Brian hesitated. "They're angry, John. After they found out about everything, well, they don't really talk to her anymore. From what I hear, they've been asking about you. Luna's even considering moving to your city when she starts college next year." Hearing that gave me a mix of emotions. Relief, sadness, and a quiet vindication. I thanked Brian for the update and ended the call, but his words stayed with me. A few months later, my kids, Luna and Liam, came to visit. By then, they were old enough to understand the truth. I hadn't pushed them to choose sides. That wasn't my way. But when they walked through my door, their hugs felt tighter than ever, as if they'd been waiting years to come home. "Dad," Luna said as she sat on the couch, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" "It wasn't your burden to bear," I replied, my voice steady. "You were kids. All I wanted was to protect you." Liam nodded, his jaw tightening. "She lied to us, to you. Jake lied too. They took everything from you. How could you just walk away?" I thought about that for a moment, because staying and fighting would have hurt you both more. Leaving was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it gave me a chance to build something better, for me, and eventually for you. Luna wiped a tear from her cheek. Well, we're here now, and we're staying. If that's okay. I pulled them both into a hug. It's more than okay. It's everything I've wanted. Life settled into a rhythm after that. Luna and Liam became regular fixtures in my new world. Claire embraced them as if they were her own, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had a family again. But one afternoon, as Claire and I strolled through the park, the past came crashing back. We just finished grabbing coffee and were walking hand in hand when I spotted her, Emily. She was sitting alone on a weathered bench, staring at the ground. Her once vibrant blonde hair was streaked with gray, and her face, once full of life, was pale and drawn. She looked thinner than I remembered, as if the weight of her choices had hollowed her out. I should have kept walking. I should have ignored her. But then she looked up and saw me. "John," she called, her voice trembling. Claire glanced at me, her brow furrowing slightly. I squeezed her hand. "It's okay," I said softly. "Give me a minute." Reluctantly, Claire walked a few steps away, giving us space but keeping me in her line of sight. I approached Emily slowly, unsure of what to expect. She looked up at me, tears glistening in her tired eyes. "Hi," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emily," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was heavy, filled with years of unspoken words. Finally, she broke it. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "For everything. For lying to you. For betraying you. For destroying our family." I studied her face, searching for any hint of insincerity, but all I saw was desperation and regret. "I lost Jake," she continued, her words tumbling out in a rush. "He left me with nothing. The kids, they won't even speak to me. And the house," she let out a bitter laugh. "I couldn't even sell it. You made sure of that." "That's right," I said, my voice steady. "It was never about punishing you, Emily. It was about protecting them." Her shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought she might break down entirely. "I've lost everything, John," she whispered. "Everything. And it's my fault. I know that. But, please, can we talk? Can we try to?" She hesitated, her eyes searching mine. "Can we at least be civil?" I felt a flicker of the old pain, the memory of the man I'd been 5 years ago. But it was distant, like a scar that had long since healed. "I've moved on, Emily," I said simply. "You should too." Her face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please, John, I'm begging you. I'm so alone. I can't fix what I've done, but maybe we could try to be friends." I shook my head. "We can't go back, Emily. And honestly, I don't want to. The life I have now is better than anything we ever had." Her eyes flicked to Claire, who was watching us from a distance. "She seems nice," Emily said softly. "She is," I replied. "She's everything you weren't." The words hung in the air between us, heavy but true. Emily nodded slowly, as if she couldn't argue. "Goodbye, Emily," I said, turning to leave. "John," she called after me, her voice breaking. I paused, but didn't look back. "Take care of yourself." As I rejoined Claire, she slipped her hand into mine. "You okay?" she asked gently. "Yeah," I said, glancing back at the bench. Emily was still sitting there, her shoulders slumped, her face in her hands. "Who was she?" Claire asked, though I suspected she already knew. "Just someone I used to know," I replied. Claire didn't press further. She simply squeezed my hand as we walked away, leaving the past behind us. For the first time in years, I felt truly free. Life wasn't without its challenges, but it was finally mine to shape. Over the years, I learned that moving on wasn't about erasing the past. It was about creating a future so fulfilling that the past became a shadow, something that no longer held power over me. Luna and Liam, though not my biological children, had chosen to stay in my life. It wasn't an easy transition. There were tears, tough conversations, and moments where anger bubbled to the surface. But their choice to be with me reaffirmed that love wasn't defined by blood. They were my kids in every way that mattered. And then there was Claire. Meeting her had been unexpected. Love, after everything I'd been through, felt foreign, almost unattainable. But Claire changed that. Slowly, patiently, she showed me that trust could be rebuilt and that love could be honest and kind. One crisp autumn morning, I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, watching Luna and Liam kick a soccer ball around the yard. Their laughter echoed through the air, a sound I hadn't realized I'd missed so much until it returned to my life. Claire stepped out of the house, a mug in her hand, her auburn hair catching the morning sun. "You look lost in thought," she said, sitting beside me. "Just thinking about how far we've come," I replied, gesturing to the kids. She smiled, leaning into me. "They're happy, John. You've done a great job raising them." "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. Her hand found mine, and for a moment, we sat in comfortable silence, watching the kids. Later that day, while Luna and Liam were out meeting friends, Claire and I tackled the attic. It was one of those tasks we'd put off for months, but with the kids gone, we finally had the time. As we sifted through old boxes, Claire held up a photo album I hadn't seen in years. "Do you want to keep this?" she asked gently. I glanced at the album, its worn leather cover bringing back memories of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. Inside were photos of Emily, the kids as toddlers, and the life I'd worked so hard to build before it all fell apart. "I don't know," I admitted. Claire opened it, flipping through the pages. She stopped at a photo of Luna sitting on my shoulders at the beach, her face covered in ice cream. "This one's worth keeping," Claire said, pulling out the photo. "It's not about her. It's about you and Luna. That moment is yours." I smiled, taking the photo from her. "You're right." We kept a few more photos, ones that held meaning beyond the betrayal, and packed the rest away. It was cathartic, in a way, to sort through those memories and decide which ones I wanted to carry forward. That evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Luna brought up an idea that had been brewing for a while. "So," she began, twirling her fork in her spaghetti, "I was thinking, what if we all went on a trip together? Like a family vacation?" Liam perked up. "That'd be awesome. We haven't done anything like that in forever." I exchanged a glance with Claire, who smiled. "I think that's a great idea," she said. "Where do you want to go?" I asked. Luna grinned. "Somewhere warm, with a beach, preferably one without you embarrassing us," Liam added with a smirk. "Embarrassing you is part of my job as a dad," I replied, earning groans from both kids. We spent the rest of dinner brainstorming destinations, and for the first time in years, I felt the weight of the past lifting. This wasn't just a new chapter, it was a new book entirely. The trip itself was everything we'd hoped for. We chose Hawaii, a place none of us had ever been. The kids spent their days snorkeling and exploring, while Claire and I found time to relax and reconnect. One evening, as the sun set over the ocean, Luna and Liam surprised me with a gift. A framed photo of the four of us from the trip. "To the best dad ever," the inscription read. "Even if he embarrasses us," Liam added with a grin. I hugged them both, my throat tight with emotion. Claire rested a hand on my shoulder, her eyes shining. "You deserve this," she said softly. But not all reminders of the past stayed buried. A few weeks after the trip, I received an email from Emily. The subject line was simple. "I'm sorry." I debated deleting it without reading, but curiosity got the better of me. "John, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, and I don't blame you, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. Not just for what I did to you, but for everything, the lies, the betrayal, the hurt I caused the kids. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to tell you that I see now what I destroyed. You gave me everything, and I threw it away. And now I have nothing. Take care of them, John. You're a better parent than I ever was. They're lucky to have you." Emily, I stared at the screen for a long time, unsure how to feel. The anger I once carried was gone, replaced by something else, pity, perhaps, or maybe just indifference. When Claire walked into the room, she noticed the look on my face. "What is it?" "An email from Emily," I replied. Claire's expression didn't change. She never judged me for how I dealt with my past. "What does she want?" "Nothing," I said, closing the laptop. "Just closure, I guess." "And how do you feel?" I thought about it for a moment. Like I finally have closure, too. The years continued to pass, each one better than the last. Luna graduated college and began a career in environmental science, while Liam pursued his passion for photography. Watching them grow into kind, resilient adults filled me with pride. As for Claire and me, we built a life filled with trust and laughter. We got married in a small ceremony, with Luna and Liam standing by our sides. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Claire turned to me. "Do you ever think about what might have been? If things had been different?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I remember that everything led me here. To you, to this life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "Neither would I." In the end, the best revenge wasn't about punishing those who wronged me. It was about living a life so full, so rich with love and meaning, that the past became nothing more than a distant memory. And as I sat there, surrounded by the family I'd built, I knew I'd found my new beginning. It was a quiet Sunday morning, one of those rare moments where life felt whole and undisturbed. The smell of coffee drifted from the kitchen, where Claire hummed a soft tune as she prepared breakfast. Luna and Liam were sprawled across the living room couch, playfully arguing over which movie to rewatch for the 100th time. Their laughter rippled through the house, and for the first time in years, I felt a sense of calm, the kind that comes when you believe the worst is behind you. But life has a strange way of reminding you that the past doesn't always stay buried. I had meant to spend the morning organizing the attic, a task I'd been putting off for years. Boxes were stacked haphazardly, a mix of forgotten memorabilia and things I probably should have thrown away long ago. As I worked my way through the clutter, my hands brushed against a weathered box tucked deep into the corner. I pulled it out, recognizing it immediately. The box was from my old life with Emily, a collection of letters, photos, and trinkets from a time when things seemed perfect. My first instinct was to shove it back into the shadows, but something about it drew me in. As I sifted through the contents, an envelope caught my eye. It was sealed and marked with a simple phrase scrawled in Emily's handwriting. "For John." I froze. The handwriting was unmistakable, the name so deliberate that it felt like she had written it knowing I'd find it one day. My heart began to pound as I debated whether to open it. Did I really want to unearth something from her? What if it was just more manipulation? But curiosity won out, and with shaking hands, I tore the envelope open. "John, if you're reading this, it means things didn't turn out the way I'd hoped. I don't know where you are, or if you've moved on, but I need to tell you something I couldn't say before. Luna and Liam, they are yours." I lied. I told you they weren't because I was scared, because I didn't want to face what I had done. Jake convinced me it would be easier to control the situation if you believed they weren't your children. I know now how cruel that was. The truth is, you were always the better parent. You loved them unconditionally, even when you thought they weren't yours. You gave them stability, a home, everything I failed to provide. I don't deserve your forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. But please, take care of them. They need you more than they'll ever need me. I'm sorry for everything. Emily, the letter shook me to my core. I read it 3 times, trying to process the words. Luna and Liam were mine. All this time, the guilt I carried, the doubt that maybe I wasn't enough for them, was for nothing. They had been mine all along. The anger came next. How could she have done this? How could she have let me live under the weight of her lies? Let me question my connection to the 2 people I loved most in this world. And yet, buried beneath the rage was something else. Relief. Relief that the bond one had felt with Luna and Liam wasn't a lie. That I wasn't clinging to something that wasn't mine. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, I sat down with Claire in the living room, the letter clutched in my hand. She noticed my expression immediately, setting her book aside. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice calm and steady. I handed her the letter, watching as her eyes scanned the page. When she finished, she set it down gently, her fingers lingering on the paper. "That's a lot," she said finally. "How are you feeling?" "I don't know," I admitted, running a hand through my hair. Angry, relieved, confused. It changes every minute. Claire leaned forward, her hand resting on mine. "What are you going to do?" I need to tell Luna and Liam, I said after a long pause. They deserve to know. This changes everything for them. Claire nodded. It does. But it doesn't change who you are to them, John. You've always been their dad. This letter just proves what they've probably known all along. Her words grounded me, as they always did. The next weekend, I sat Luna and Liam down in the living room. They looked at me with curiosity, sensing the seriousness of the moment. What's going on? Liam asked. I hesitated, holding up the letter. I found this in the attic. It's from your mother. Their expressions darkened at the mention of Emily. While we had maintained a civil relationship for their sake, their trust in her had been deeply fractured after the truth of her affair and the lies she told. What does it say? Luna asked, her voice cautious. I handed her the letter. I think it's best if you read it yourselves. Luna and Liam read the letter together, their eyes widening as the truth unfolded. Luna was the first to speak, her voice shaking. So, you're really our dad? I've always been your dad, I said firmly. This letter doesn't change that. It just confirms what I've always known in my heart. Liam's hands clenched the letter tightly. She lied to us. She made us believe. He stopped, his jaw tightening as he fought back tears. I know, I said gently, and I'm sorry for everything she put you through. But I need you both to know that this doesn't change how much I love you. You've always been my kids, no matter what. Luna burst into tears, throwing her arms around me. Liam followed, his grip just as strong. In that moment, the pain of the past melted away, replaced by a sense of unity and healing. The letter didn't fix everything, but it gave us a sense of closure we hadn't realized we needed. Luna and Liam asked questions about the past, about my feelings during those dark times, and I answered as honestly as I could. As the days turned into weeks, the truth brought us closer. The bond we shared deepened, strengthened by the knowledge that our love had endured the worst of betrayals. Months later, I made a decision. With Claire's encouragement, I wrote a letter to Emily, not to forgive her, but to acknowledge the truth she had finally revealed. Emily, I received your letter. Thank you for telling me the truth, even if it came too late to undo the damage. Luna and Liam know now, and they're doing well. I can't forgive you for what you did, but I hope you find peace someday. John I mailed the letter without expecting a reply. As the years went on, our lives continued to grow. Luna graduated college, Liam started his own photography business, and Claire and I built a home filled with love and trust. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, Luna raised her glass in a toast. To Dad, she said, smiling. The real MVP. Liam laughed, clinking his glass against mine. You're the best, even if your dad jokes are terrible. Claire squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride. In that moment, surrounded by the people I loved most, I realized that the past no longer held any power over me. The truth had set us free, and the life we had now, it was better than anything I could have imagined.